from being a destination for millions of pilgrims to sacred sites of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, the turbulent and fragile region is also at the heart of global energy, trade, and financial dynamics, and an emerging hub of technological research and development. And in a world interconnected and interdependent more than ever, there is almost always an international dimension to a regional conflict. Trying to understand the diverse forces that are shaping the politics and economics of this region, we are joined by Mr. Talmiz Ahmad, Mr. Pankaj Saran, and Mr. Vikram Mehta for our session on West Asia at War, Will There Ever Be Peace? I would request our guests to grace the stage. Veteran diplomat Mr. Talmiz Ahmad has been posted. Veteran diplomat Mr. Talmiz Ahmad has been posted in a number of West Asian countries such as Kuwait, Iraq, Yemen, and Jeddah. He has also held positions in the Indian missions in New York, London, and Pretoria. He served as Indian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the UAE. After retiring from foreign service, he is now a full-time academic and holds the Ram Sathe Chair in International Studies, Symbiosis International University at Pune. He's published 4 books, and his latest book, titled West Asia at War, Repression, Resistance, and Great Power Games, was published last year. Mr. Pankaj Saran is a former diplomat with 40 years of experience in foreign, strategic, and national security affairs. He has served in key positions within the Government of India, in the Prime Minister's Office, the National Security Council Secretariat, Ministry of External Affairs, and in Indian missions in Moscow, Dhaka, Washington, Cairo, and Geneva. From 2018 to 2021, he served as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Affairs under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, dealing with regional and global strategy formulation, including maritime security and Arctic affairs, neighborhood policies, and technology, as well as economic security. Mr. Saran has also served as India's ambassador to Russia and India's High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Former IAS officer Mr. Vikram Mehta is an alumnus of Oxford University and Tufts University, America. He was, until November 2012, chairman of the Shell Group of companies in India. Mr. Mehta, an independent director and chairman of Governance, Nomination and Remuneration Committee, has been appointed as the lead independent director from 2021. Gentlemen, we would request you to begin the session.
Thank you very much. At the outset, may I just say how delighted I am to be here today, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm honored to be moderating a conversation between 2 very distinguished senior Foreign Service officers on a subject that's contemporary and critical. The subject, West Asia at War, is one that is now on the front pages of every newspaper every day. Yesterday, the American and the UK Air Force bombed Yemen, bombed the Houthis. Houthis, in turn, were bombing shipping traffic through Suez Canal and the Straits of Hormuz. 2 months ago, as all of you know, the Hamas, or the Al-Qasim Brigade of Hamas, attacked Israel. They killed over 1,000 Israelis. They took hostage 200 Israelis. In retaliation, the Israelis have devastated Gaza. Over 25,000 Palestinians have been killed. 50% of those who have died in the retaliation are children under the age of 18. There is this ever-present risk that the war will now escalate beyond just Gaza and Israel and encompass Lebanon. There's a risk that Iran might get involved. So the topic of today's conversation, the Middle East at war, a topic that Ambassador Ahmad, in fact, wrote about a year ago, is one that is not of concern just as an academic exercise. It's something that is of absolute immediate concern to all of us in India. India will be directly impacted by anything that happens in the Middle East. We import 85% of our crude oil. Much of it comes through the Straits of Hormuz. A large part of it is sourced from the Middle Eastern countries. So this is a subject that is, as I say, critically important today. And I want to just start the conversation by asking you, Ambassador Ahmad, do you feel that in light of what's happened over the last 2 months and in light of what's happening even as I speak, the Middle East can ever be at peace? Do you think that Israel and Palestine and the two-state solution that was considered as the most viable solution is now shattered beyond redemption?
Over the last 100 years, West Asia has been subject to external interventions from colonial powers. Those external interventions have not abated. They are the primary cause of the instability, insecurity, and uncertainty that prevails in the region. Very rarely have Western powers accepted their culpability. But look at the narrative, it's so clear, right from the colonial powers of France and Britain, who then re-engineered the cartography of that area, and then at the same time supported the Zionist movement and brought a large number of Jews from Europe into the so-called Promised Land, and then constantly intervened in the domestic politics of the region to subserve their own interests. This is the root cause. So if you were to ask me, can West Asia be at peace? Certainly it can be. I would just wish these Western powers would stay at home, take care of their problems at home instead of exporting their problems. They've been exporting this right across several thousand kilometers, constantly intervening and intervening militarily. Has anyone ever heard the word American diplomacy? Every time something happens, it's the American military that is then unleashed. Look at the trail of destruction, death and destruction that they have left behind. Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya. And they are indirectly responsible for what is happening as far as Israel and Gaza is concerned. It is the Americans who forbade the Security Council from passing a resolution calling for immediate ceasefire. So I would hold the Americans directly responsible for the several thousand deaths that have happened since their veto occurred in the Security Council just a few weeks ago. Every day, 100 to 200 Palestinians are being killed. We can, at the moment, the West Asia, as far as West Asia is concerned, the rest of the region is struggling to come to terms with their own other issues. Saudi Arabia is engaged with the Iranians. Turkey is engaged with Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE. And you find the region itself shrugging off the American yoke, attempting to address their issues themselves. But nobody can address the issue of Palestine except the Americans. Have we seen the Americans do anything constructive and useful over the last 30 years? Never. They are always subservient to the Israeli and to the maximalist Israeli agenda in the region. Therefore, you will not have peace in the region so long as the Americans subordinate the regional interests to the interests of the extreme right wing in Israel.
Okay, well, that's a very strong statement. So you've essentially made the point that the stability of the Middle East depends on America and America's intervention. Would you agree with that, Ambassador Saran?
Firstly, thank you very much, Vikram, for being as part of the panel. Thank you, Talmiz, and thank you to BLF. I would agree to an extent. There is another aspect which is actually live and no is the internal divisions in the region. These are religious differences between the Shiite states and the Sunni states. These are problems arising from the nature of the Gulf kingdoms themselves. So while there is American presence or Western presence, a lot of it is also by invitation. So a lot of the Gulf kingdoms have consciously chosen as a matter of policy to invite the West as part of their not just economic development but political and security architecture. So there is a pull factor. We all know that the Arab world itself is very, very badly divided. I think the divisions have actually surfaced once again in the since October 7th, that you see differentiated reactions by different Arab nations to the events of October 7. For me, what is very troubling is that not a single Arab nation or a Gulf nation is willing to take even one single Palestinian refugee into its territory. Not Egypt, not Jordan, not Lebanon, no one. So there is a lot of lip service going on, but when it comes to practical, concrete action, we don't see that. What we do see are rhetorical statements. We see money being thrown at the problem, but we don't see real action. Now, I completely agree with Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad. I'm actually slightly more radical in that view. I really don't think there is any solution to the Palestinian question. I do not see the two-state solution seeing the light of day in the foreseeable future for many, many reasons. I think everyone knows it in the region. Washington knows it. But because it is politically correct, the Palestinians have become somewhat of a holy cow. So you have to talk about it. But the unfortunate and miserable reality is that I do not see a Palestinian homeland. But what, from my point of view, is also something which, as an Indian, we should reflect upon, is that this is the intersection of the three major religions of the world: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And it's a lesson for us in India, which is a multicultural, multi-ethnic, plural, multi-religious society, that they have not been able to find a solution. History is so overpowering on the mindsets that it simply swamps out any signs of any innovative solutions.
So I'm going to maybe just continue this conversation or continue on this particular topic, because I have to admit I'm a little bit more sanguine, but without any solution. But let me tell you why I like to see the glass half full rather than half empty. In 1951, the European, that is Germany, England, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Spain, and France, signed the European Steel Community. This is 6 years after the Second World War ended. And as you all know, in the Second World War, Germany was at war with France and all the other 4 countries. No one would have expected that 6 years after these two combatants had in a way ended the conflict, they would be signing a treaty that then led to the European Union. So my question to both of you separately is, are you saying that there is absolutely no chance of two states, Palestine and Israel, sitting adjacent to each other? Do you say that there's no chance of a confederation whereby you have free movement between Israel and Palestine? You have a common market. Do you see no solution other than war between Palestine and the Jews, Palestinian Arabs and the Jews? Is that what I'm hearing from you? I know that today, as we sit, it's very difficult to conceptualize a solution, a peace in the region, because we are talking about a war that might escalate. But we have to look beyond that. We have to stretch our mind. And that's what happened in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. And I'm asking you too, because both of you are true experts in the Middle East, is there some creative, conceptual framework within which these two entities can come together? And the second part of my question is, can India play a role in bringing these two combatants together? So let me pass that on to you first.
The reason for this visceral divide between the Palestinians and the Israelis lies in the history of Judaism and the history of the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement is very heavily influenced by the idea of Messianism. Messianism, in terms of which this land, not territorially defined, but loosely referred to as the Promised Land, this land was promised by God for the exclusive use of the Jewish people. This, therefore, exclusivity number one, for one particular community, that is the Jewish community. This land is sacred. Therefore, no Jew has the right to share this land with any non-Jew. Flowing from this, if any non-Jew wishes to live on this land, he must either be exterminated or he must be a slave. This is the messianic view of the sacredness of this land. This land is not defined. There is the concept called Eretz Israel. That means any time a holy prophet in the Old Testament touched a particular piece of land, that land can be legitimately claimed as part of the promised land. This is the impulse. And Netanyahu's government today has extreme right-wing elements for whom these concepts are fundamental in their political thinking. These are not thinking that is shared by everybody. There are numerous Jews who don't share it. You must have seen how many Jews have come out protesting against this extraordinary mindless violence being perpetrated on the Palestinian people. There is a solution. It's a solution that will take time. No political issue is without solution, and therefore I don't have an aggressive posture that nothing is solved. It cannot be solved immediately. I have said in the past, and I'll say this again, that I too, like Martin Luther King, to paraphrase him, I have a dream. And that dream is the Palestinian and the Jew living together. The misconcept of the Zionist movement was that a land without people for a people without land. These people who came from Europe, they lived in Europe for 2,000 years, suffered miserably at the hands of the Christians. They were saved by Muslim kingdoms. When they were thrown out of Europe after the fall of Spain, it is the Muslim kingdoms where their culture and their faith flourished. Therefore, there is no natural history of animosity between Muslims and Jews as there is between the Christians and the Jews. 2,000 years the Jews suffered pogroms and a second-class status because they were blamed for the murder of Jesus Christ. Therefore, they were sent by the Europeans to Palestine. And the Europeans packed their bags and ran from there. But even now, they have set up a very insecure state. This state cannot fight for itself for a single day without American help. Many of you saw with shock that on 8th October, American military supplies started coming for the Israeli armed forces. The same armed forces that we are told is one of the best armed forces in the world. A few days ago, an Israeli general said, if American supplies stopped, there would be no fighting in the region. I believe there is a new generation will come of Israelis who recognize the Palestinians as their brothers. After all, both of them, if the Old Testament is to be believed, are the children of Abraham. If they are the children of Abraham, they have an equal right to the space promised by God. And therefore, I believe there is going to be a generation of Jews, and it is emerging, it is at a nascent stage. This extremist element that rules that country is a minority. But because of the vagaries of electoral politics of Israel, they are the ones who have become dominant. and politicians like Netanyahu pander to this. But there is a solution and it will come.
Pankaj.
Thank you, Vikram. You asked whether it's a glass half full or glass half empty. To be honest, I'm actually at this point in a very pessimistic mood. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the history of the last, say, 3-4 decades, you know, we started from a very acute situation where even the existence of the state of Israel was in question. We moved a long way from there. Increasingly, a large number of Arab states, starting with Egypt, began to recognize Israel. We saw the huge efforts made in Oslo, in Camp David, in the early 2000s, in the 90s. President after president in the United States put their personal stake in the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. All of this failed one by one by one. And on the other hand, we found that more and more Arab states started recognizing Israel, started dealing with Israel. We had the Abraham Accords, we had the I2U2. All these were initiatives which were taken with the full consent of the Arab world, minus Iran, to bring some normalcy into the relationship. And as a consequence, what happened was that the Palestinian question receded into the background. It was not the conflict which was at the top of the Middle East geostrategic equation. So with the Palestinian conflict going into some sort of a background and more comfort being given to Israel by the Arabs, we had all thought that we were reaching the place which Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad has spoken about, that finally everyone in the region was willing to come together to live peacefully. Obviously, everyone was wrong. And there were certain sections of the Palestinians who were not on board with this process of normalization, which went on for many decades. And it is this section of the Palestinians who have done what they did on the 7th of October. And none of us, forget India, the Israelis, the Americans, the Arabs, had any idea that this was going to happen. So I am at this point pessimistic, because if we could have made so much progress in the last 20 years to bring normalcy into the region, and all it took was this act to bring us back and take us back 30, 40 years, then where is the hope that we will be, at this stage, be able to find a resolution?
Excuse me. I think most of your statements are wrong. They have no basis in reality, and they have no basis as far as history is concerned. Last 20 years has not been any trend as far as normalcy is concerned. The Israeli believes he can be part of West Asia by completely ignoring the Palestinian question. That's not going to happen. What are the Arab states who finally so-called normalized? UAE and Bahrain? What strategic value do they have? Overwhelmingly, the Arab states recognize, and if any one of them thought that there was another future possible, they have been reminded cruelly that the Palestinian issue is the most important issue. What did the Israeli want? He wants to have so-called normalization by keeping 6 million Palestinians as slaves. That is not going to happen. The Palestinian has not accepted occupation from 1948 till today. He is not going to accept occupation. He would rather lift a stone and take a bullet in his chest rather than surrender to the Israelis. And if anyone in the Arab world believed contrarily, he believed something different, he has been severely corrected. No Arab is now going to normalize. And don't please use the term Abraham Accord. What does the Prophet Abraham have got to do with all this normalization? It is a term that Donald Trump constructed for his electoral interest. This is a normalization done by the UAE. They have a sovereign right to do what they wish, but let us not pretend that there is any strategic change as far as the region is concerned.
Yeah, but maybe before we get into an argument over facts, let's stay at the level of trends. There's no denying, I think, that in the aftermath of October 7th, and let's just stay with that as the sort of start point of our discussion, the reactions of Israel have been disproportionate and have led to results that have put them in the International Court of Justice, where they're being accused by South Africa of genocide. Whether that stands or not is another matter. There's also no denying, and you yourself said, Ambassador Talmiz, that Prime Minister Netanyahu leads the most right-wing extremist government in Israel ever. There's also no denying that Netanyahu himself is arguably the most unpopular prime minister that Israel has ever had. And that if there were elections tomorrow, he would lose. And so one can infer from that that part of the reaction of Israel is also by Netanyahu to stay in power. Now the question that I ask myself is, what happens post-Netanyahu? It may be 6 months from now, it may be a year from now, but Netanyahu is a mortal politician, he's going to go. He's not going to be there. There is no getting away from the fact that Israel's security is going to be undermined if it continues to have, it is surrounded by Arabs who are hostile to it. So the question I raised earlier, and this is the question I really want to start with you, Pankaj, is what is the role of India? Can India actually play a role in bridging the divide between Israel and the Palestinians, not the Hamas? Hamas is a subset of Palestine. And the Al-Qassam Brigade is a subset of Hamas. It's a militant wing of Hamas, which may not have actually even sought permission from the political wing of Hamas to attack Israel on October 7th. No one knows this. But the fact of the matter is, a large number of the so-called Hamas, political Hamas, were caught by surprise when this act happened on October 7th. So Hamas is not an undifferentiated unit. It is not a homogeneous unit. It's a heterogeneous unit with many different factions to it. So I'm going to start with the question, India still has a role to play. Otherwise, China is going to come into it, and I'm going to raise that with you, Ambassador Talmiz. But what is the role of India?
No, that's a great question. And actually, if you read Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad's book, he has categorized the whole history into different segments of time. And for me, those are very suggestive. There was a time when India did not recognize Israel because of the Arab factor and many other reasons. Our recognition of Israel took place in 1992. It met with a huge amount of opposition from the Arabs as conveying that India had, in some senses, sacrificed or given up the Palestinian cause because we wanted to curry favor with the Americans. Because if you remember, 1991 was the time when we started our reforms and we were reaching out to the Americans. So it has taken all these years for everyone in that region to come to terms with the fact that India has a relationship with Israel, but we can also have a relationship with the Arabs and the Gulf and Iran. So today, I think, to answer your question, we are definitely better positioned than we were in the past. Remember Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad was ambassador in Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was the first prime minister to actually get the honor to address the parliament in Riyadh. It was a game-changing visit. So from there, we have come a huge distance with all these relationships with the UAE, with Saudi, with Bahrain, with Oman, etc. So we are better off today. We also have a much better relationship with the United States, which is the primary player, as Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad has correctly said. So we are better positioned today. The question is, how much bandwidth do we have? How much national capacity do we have to get into this? Because there are degrees of intervention or facilitation that are possible. One is a light touch. The other is a much deeper involvement as a mediator or facilitator or intermediary, whichever word you want to use. But I would say, yes, today we are better positioned because we have fairly strong ties with Israel, with the major Arab countries, the major Gulf states. Our national capacity is greater. But then the million-dollar question is how much of our leadership is willing, among 20 items on their in-tray, to pick this one and devote their attention. The same question was asked for us, to us after Ukraine. And so, we have to prioritize. Do we focus on immediate neighborhood? Do we focus on this? So it all boils down, therefore, to how much we can do. But in terms of the objective conditions, I think we're better off today than we were, say, in 1992.
What would be your response? And if you could, in your answer, also perhaps touch on the
China.
role of China. Okay. I would have said China and Russia, but I think Russia is now somewhat on the backbench.
From 2011 till 2019, I've written a paper a year recommending very strongly an Indian role to promote peace and stability in West Asia, given a very elaborate explanation for this recommendation. When Prime Minister Modi went to West Asia from 2015 onwards, I celebrated, because I truly believe that he was building on the extraordinary relations that we have had over the last 5,000 years. And coming from Gujarat, he is fully familiar with the engagements of his people with the Arabian Peninsula going back 3,000 or 4,000 years. And then, since then, there has been a deep sense of personal disappointment. And I have said this before, and therefore if some of you have heard me, please forgive me. India's approach to West Asia, as it is to every other region, is to have relations bilaterally and on a transactional basis. Two principles, bilateral and transactional. We do not engage with the region as a whole. Only when you engage with the region as a whole can you play a strategic role. Only then, otherwise you have separate relationships. You have a relationship with Iran and with Saudi Arabia and with Israel, with the UAE and with Qatar. It amounts to nothing except as a bilateral relationship which is overwhelmingly based in terms of energy, economy and community. The strategic content that should have been there and for which we are well placed and well qualified has simply never been activated. We don't want that. We have abdicated that role. The region wanted it. If you see all the joint statements that Prime Minister entered into, there is a reference to India's role in promoting peace and stability in the region. Every one of those joint statements speaks about India's historic connectivity, speaks of a strategic partnership, and pleads for a role by India. But India, as I said, opted for a bilateral and transactional approach. This role made sense when the American hegemony was present. Today, the region has moved on, and it's very clear from 2010. Ever since the Americans spoke of the pivot to Asia, the region has slowly and today very robustly and openly asserted strategic autonomy. India should have been there. That agreement that was done between Saudi Arabia and Iran on 10th March last year, it was a tripartite agreement presided over by China. That was our place, and that is what we should have done. I feel that India has no interest whatsoever in playing any constructive diplomatic role beyond its shores. This business of I2U2 and the so-called Mediterranean connection, that is all hogwash. It has no content. It is a private sector arrangement. It has no strategic value whatsoever. The private sector is encouraged to talk to each other and pursue deals. The private sector doesn't need. Governments are supposed to clear the way, and then they can move forward and make the money that they need to make. Governments are not in the picture. That is not a strategic agreement. Even this Mediterranean business is bogus. That the Americans needed it at that time because they had agreed to the G20 joint declaration, and therefore they wanted something to show for their presence in the region, and we went along with it. it has no strategic content or value. It is in this context that you see the emergence of China. China is a newcomer to the region, please be clear, and I have mentioned this yesterday and I'll quote this again. Years ago, when I was involved with engagements on a track 2 basis, not track 2 really, an academic discussion basis, I came up with this idea of India, China, Japan, and Republic of Korea pursuing an Asian initiative to pursue peace and stability in the region. At that time, the Chinese told me, you take the lead. We don't know this region. We are not familiar with it. You've been here 5,000 years. We've been here for 5 years. Take the lead for us. From 2012, the Chinese kept a very low key. But what did they do? Let me tell you, because I've seen it. They built up expertise relating to West Asia. Every university in China has a center for Middle East studies. They have more than 1,000. In 2015, a man who is the president of the Chinese West Asian Scholars Association told me he has only 1,000 scholars relating to West Asia. We, who have 5,000 years of connectivity, perhaps don't have even 50 scholars. Now, China has built up this expertise. They have got scholars. Every major Western university had Chinese scholars. Every major West Asian university has Chinese scholars learning Arabic. In 2020, we got the first inkling of a quasi-mediation diplomacy being considered by China. And 2023, we saw it taking shape. So yes, I would say to you, the place that we abdicated has been filled in by China.
Before I carry on, we started 10 minutes late. Do I have that 10 minutes latitude? Okay, good. So I'm going to move to the audience after this one last question to the both of you, and that's really it's a simple but impossibly difficult question, which is, what is your outlook? Now let me, for the region, let me ask that question in the context of some things that go through my head. See, my background is in energy, and this is the first Middle East crisis that I've known where the price of oil has actually fallen, even though the Middle East is in turmoil. Most other crises, when something happens in the Middle East, crude oil prices go through the roof. But just the opposite has happened here, and there are good reasons for it. But I've really asked the question, can we be complacent? Should we actually just sit back and say, okay, the price is soft, demand is low, supply is abundant, and therefore we don't have to worry about what's happening in the Middle East? And I'm asking the what-if question. What if, the conflict in Gaza escalates? What if Iran gets involved? What if the Straits of Hormuz gets blockaded? And if that happens, of course, the price of oil will indeed rise, and India will suffer a massive economic dislocation. So I'm going to just ask the two of you separately, and a short answer, but do you think, what is the risk of the conflict widening and escalating? It's the same question to both of you.
My few conversations with some of the American experts suggests that the Americans are very, very concerned about escalation. And they're trying their best to limit the conflict. They're also very cognizant of the fact that they may not, whether they will succeed at all or not, because of what you said about Netanyahu's domestic compulsions, which are so obvious. But there is that thought in the American establishment, check it before it goes out of control, because unlike Ukraine, this will have direct American military intervention. So it's a complex situation. They know what they should be doing and what they ought to do, but they're not sure whether they will succeed. The complication is, this is election year. The American society and polity is divided. So we are sitting at an inflection point, at a stage which is sensitive. I would only last point, of course, I don't want to be simplistic, but when you compare two situations, which also you shouldn't, but for the sake of this discussion. Between Ukraine and Gaza, I would say this one is much more serious for India than Ukraine because of the reasons you have mentioned.
In 2019, you had the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. And an extraordinary book came out. It was called Sleepwalkers. The world had sleepwalked into the First World War. Nobody willed it. No major statesman planned for it. The armed forces were not ready for it. Some of them said it would last for about 3 months and people would be home for Christmas. It lasted 4 to 5 years and killed several 100,000 people and destroyed the world that had existed till then. That is called sleepwalking. It is a failure of wisdom, knowledge, and statesmanship. That is a lesson for us. The question we should ask is, are we sleepwalking into a regional and therefore global disaster? Perhaps we are. The greatest failure here is that of the Americans. The fading hegemon is truly today discredited because he has sanctioned war as an end in itself, mass murder as an end in itself. Even the Israeli is not able to articulate any strategic vision. What does he want in Gaza? He wants to kill as many Hamas as possible. In 3 months, he hasn't killed any major Hamas leader in Gaza. Therefore, he had to go to Lebanon and kill the has-been who had been out of date for 10 years and wasn't involved with anything happening. And therefore, you had to kill the Aruri because you have to show that you are still a big guy. You are not. You don't know where the Hamas is. You've not killed anybody. Therefore, mass murder as an end in itself is what is going on as pretending to be strategy. There is no strategy at all in that area. Where do we go from here? Is there likely to be a regional conflagration? Very likely, because you need to sleepwalk. Hezbollah is provoking you. The Iraqi Shia militia are provoking you. 100 attacks already on American target with some retaliation. The Houthis are provoking you. These wretched characters whom we never even knew that they existed are today the most lethal weapon that the Iranians have because they are challenging global shipping. And what have they asked for? How come nobody has ever told us? What does the Houthi want? He said, I want more assistance, humanitarian assistance going to the Palestinians. Give that. He's not a madman fighting the world because he doesn't have anything better to do. And he's called for a ceasefire. He's called for an immediate ceasefire. The Americans don't have the courage to demand a ceasefire because otherwise, what is Israel going to show for it? They have reached a kill rate of over 1:20. The normal kill rate is 1:10. Now it's 1:20. And yet, nothing to show for it. No strategic advantage. Because now I have asked a question in 2 separate articles. Does Netanyahu want a regional conflagration? And my answer at that time, in those articles, one in Arab News and one in the Hindu a few days ago, said yes. He has nothing to lose. This pathetic little person has absolutely nothing to lose. The minute the war stops in Gaza, he is going to be jailed. The Supreme Court has already thrown out his judicial reforms. He is going to jail. Many generals are going to resign. Possibly the right-wing government will fall. It is in this scenario that this man has announced, I am going to keep the war on for as long as I can, and the Americans facing election with a president who's falling apart visibly in front of our eyes. He's facing Donald Trump from jail. So you're going to have an extraordinary spectacle in November that either the US will be ruled from jail or from a hospital bed. They're breaking apart. It is in this context that the region has opted for strategic autonomy. They are looking at solving their problems themselves. At some stage, Israel will have to get its act together. Don't see that happening just yet. I'm not sure about what Benny Gantz is going to do or what Yair Lapid will do. Each of them, it's a very deeply divided country. They come together on democracy, but their democracy doesn't include the Palestinians. No serious effort has been articulated by any responsible Israeli leader that they need to address the Palestinian question, which has not been addressed since Madrid and Oslo 30 years ago. That is where we need to come. Even at this stage, and I have been sad, anguished, criticizing India, that is where India and a few other countries should raise their voice, address the Palestinian question on the basis that serves your interest and that of the Palestinians. Otherwise, you'll be constantly going to war and there will be no end to it.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. So, I'm going to ask the audience, yeah, Mrs. Mehta, my wife. She raised her hand first, that's why. I'll ask the question and answer it as well.
That was, thank you so much, ambassadors. That was an extraordinary session. But you didn't really dwell on the role of Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia is a critical player, can make all the difference. And the other thing I want to ask is, why is it that none of the Arab nations are sympathetic to the Palestinians? What is that historic relationship? Why is there any animosity or revulsion or whatever it is? I'm not familiar with it. I don't know enough, so forgive my ignorance. But I mean, it would be interesting to shed light on that. Both these two questions, please.
So, will you remember then? Huh? I mean, if you remember, I'll take 3 questions and then you can answer, okay? But please, my memory is fading.
Answer this one.
You'll answer this and you answer the Arab. Second question, okay, at the back. Then right at the back. Yeah, that gentleman. If you don't have a mic, then you're going to lose your opportunity.
Could I say the next question?
Okay, please speak.
I have heard a story of King Jordan, wherein in the history they have taken a lot of Palestinians. Okay, they have allowed a lot of Palestinians inside their city. Plus, I have also heard the story of Mr. Ziaul Haq, who have done massacre in Jordan. So, if you know the story, can you throw some light on it? Because we want to know the story of Palestinians. We are not very much innocent.
Okay, but that question I might have to ask that question only if you give a very brief answer, because the history of Palestine could take another hour. Okay, last question. I'm on this side now. Huh?
My question is.
Okay, your question, and then we'll. Yeah, please.
My question is.
But make it very brief, because I think I've seen so many hands. Very brief questions, please. Okay, no yeah.
Is it true that America, they made West Asia unstable because these countries, Iraq, Iran, Libya, and other these Arab countries, they developed a taste for a nuclear bomb. So I think because of that reason, sir, can you explain?
Bomb. Okay, so Ambassador Talmiz, if you can answer the question that Tasneem asked about Saudi Arabia, we haven't talked enough, and address also the third question on nuclear bomb, and you can allude to the Palestinian question as well, and then perhaps you could ask.
What you are looking at today is the fact that the Arab regimes, all of which are authoritarian, tyrannical and repressive, and deeply alienated from large sections of their own population, today are very, very deeply divided. This conflict has left them aghast and unable to come up with any role. What they have done is posturing. Saudis called for an Islamic Arab conference and had a ringing statement. The number of statements have come out. And yes, I agree with Pankaj, most of them, all of them are meaningless. They have not exercised real authority to say to the Americans, stop this war now. They have not done that. Why is this very difficult to say? Because they are not sure how to handle the Palestinian question. They don't have a Palestinian policy. They are concerned about Hamas. You see, the problem is that even before Gaza, the Hamas was the most popular entity in the Palestinian movement. Fatah discredited itself, which is why they never had elections. Otherwise, there was every chance that Hamas would win the Palestinian Authority and put up the president, which is why for the last 10 years without elections, Mahmoud Abbas has continued till the age of 89. He's really looking pathetic. You must have seen him just a few days ago. So this is the uncertainty relating to what will happen. As you know, the Gulf countries are very concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood, and they think that Hamas is a Brotherhood affiliated movement, believes in political Islam. Therefore, if they are triumphant and the Palestinians turn and support the Muslim Brotherhood, political Islam, what happens to us? So there may be certain concerns of this kind, but I agree with you. I'm very deeply disappointed with regard to their approach. And the American as pathetic. So really speaking, have you noticed in 3 months, no peace process from any source whatsoever? With regard to this, there was nobody, I'm not sure who was developing a nuclear weapon. The Americans happily allowed 3 countries to make develop nuclear weapons, but they were their allies. Pakistan, Israel, and apartheid South Africa, in violation of the NPT and violation of their own norms. Any other country that sought to develop nuclear weapons was punished. The only one we know about is this: Iraqis were thought that they were developing nuclear weapons, and the Israelis went and bombed their facility, and that ended it. I would say since then, my argument in my book has been that US policy relating to West Asia has been overwhelmingly influenced by Israel and by the Israel lobby within the United States. Up to the Madrid and Oslo Accord and till the assassination of Rabin, you found the Americans supporting the peace process. Once Rabin was assassinated and the peace process started withering away, and Israelis made it clear they were not going to sit with any final status discussions of, with regard to Jerusalem and the occupied territories and the right of return of refugees. They were not going to do any of those. The Americans went along with that, whether it was Clinton or it was George Bush Jr. or Obama or Donald Trump. And now, so they are not doing that. So it's not just nuclear weapons, it is the Israeli approach to the region has been to keep the Arab states weak and divided so that they don't have to address the Palestinian question at all. That is the key.
Any want to add to that before we take the other round?
Just briefly on the first question about the why there is this division in the Arab world towards Palestine. I think that goes to the heart of the matter. I mean, it was the American strategy to break the Arabs, and the biggest success was Egypt. And I was there in Egypt I worked there for 3 years. But even Egypt, which actually broke ranks, has had an iron fence as far as Gaza is concerned. They don't want a single Palestinian inside Egypt because Egypt itself is crumbling under the weight of a 100 million population. The Jordan question, I mean, the status of the Palestinian refugees in Jordan is very different from that in Egypt. Now, if you remember, I mean, and on the other question, which is also related, you remember the days of Yasser Arafat? I mean, he was the torch bearer of the Palestinian cause. After his demise, the leadership has just floundered, and Mahmoud Abbas is there, the Fatah is divided. The Israelis, the Americans, they all thought that they had now got on top of the Palestinians. But this has proved them wrong, that, if you don't have mainstream opposition, then you have to live with this kind of radical groups. But I would say, when you look at the Gulf, you look at Iran, you look at Turkey, and you look at the rest of the Arabs, very different approaches. And one of the reasons I think is also demographic. I mean, no one wants more people. You cannot have so that's the brief thing.
I want to clarify quickly this business of Palestinians moving. Just as I have a dream of the Israeli and the Palestinian living side by side, the Israeli also, Zionist, has a dream of no Palestinians, just as his forefathers saw no Palestinians in front of them when they arrived. They want to push the West Bank Palestinians, 3.6 million people, into Jordan. And they want to push the Gazans, 2.3 million people, into Egypt, into the Sinai. The Palestinians resist this. Let us be clear. It's not that they don't want. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants refugees. But the Palestinian doesn't want, because for him it is a second catastrophe, the second Nakba. Because most of the people living in Gaza are those who were thrown out of their homes when the Zionists occupied Palestine. So they don't want to go. The Palestinian has made it very clear that whatever the harm the occupation forces may do, they will not budge. They will keep on resisting. That is why the subtitle of my book is Repression, Resistance, and Great Power Games. That resistance is not going away anywhere.
Okay, 3 questions, and we'll give 3 short answers because I've been given this
I have
lady
an
here,
answer.
and then 2 others if they want. Please, brief question, brief answers.
As Mr. Pankaj said, that one of the many reasons there's geographical, ethical, and most of all humanitarian stiff between the countries put in the pie of the Middle East is because they've sent out invitations to the pity party of blood in the name of technology, security to the West themselves. But is it not that the whole reason behind havoc and turmoil is the unasked for, unattributed for involvement of the United States, be it the disintegration of the USSR as a world power with the souls of civilians in their fists, or the CIA-induced assassination of the Afghanistani leader who held a vision? Moreover, isn't it just so convenient that over 3 billion barrels of oil exists under the Palestinian land? Sir, I ask you, is the Middle East baking the cake of helplessness, or is United States setting the recipe to disaster?
Okay, 1 question. No, I mean, yeah, no,
So I
over
had a
there,
question.
they're right there, and there'll be 1 more question after that.
question,
Yeah,
which we have the
they're
mic,
right there. I've been.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Short question, please.
Yeah. Sir, so Israel has seen a contrast in leadership. You have someone like Yitzhak Rabin who was able to shake hands with his enemies by signing various peace treaties, and you have Netanyahu who is trying to establish military dominance. So, sir, for establishing peace within the region, because even Rabin failed to an extent later on, whose policies do you think will be more beneficial? Whose line of thinking would you think would be more beneficial in establishing peace in the region of Israel?
Good question.
Can we have the mic, please?
Yeah, last. You need to, your mic is not working.
My question was that do you see that possibility of growth of any political Islam there, political Muslim there like Afghanistan, some group will emerge like that and they will control the area?
I didn't understand the question.
I'm sorry, sir.
What is the question again?
My question that there is a possibility of emerging political Islam
Political
or
Islam.
some group of political Islam, they will control the region.
Okay, political Islam in the region. Okay, you start, and then you, and that will be it.
No.
Take all 3 questions.
Yeah, the very easy questions, easy answers. No, I'm joking. On the American role, clearly, listen, the reality is that the Middle East or West Asia, the politics there is determined by the United States. And the reasons are written and chronicled, and we don't go into them. But that is the geostrategic, geopolitical reality. And therefore, whatever happens in the region is a direct fallout of American policies in that region, as Ambassador Ahmad has also said. So that is a known fact. It is also a known fact that the Americans have made mistakes, not just here, but across the world. It's also a known fact that because of what they are, this whole concept of American exceptionalism, they will not accept those mistakes. Sometimes they do, but it's too late, like the invasion of Iraq, etc. So we have to move from that presumption. Secondly, till as long as the world is dependent on oil, that region will continue to be important. So there are a kind of a 2-pillar, or I wouldn't, it's more complicated, but it's Israel and oil. and the two actually feed into each other. And you know, you've heard of American presidents talking about energy independence. They would like to be independent, but they are. So that's what I would say about the American role. And you know, we've had 20 years of different wars in which America has been involved directly or indirectly. The success of these wars is also a matter which can be discussed later on. I don't know which was the other.
Which would be more beneficial to peace?
Yeah, look, you know, if you look at the chronology, you look at the chronology, you know, starting from Madrid, Oslo, everything else. What was this one common factor? It was the degree of the American president's personal involvement in the peace process. And every US president has failed, either willingly or unwillingly. No one has been able to find a solution. And I certainly do not think the current leadership in the United States or Israel wants to find a solution, because the solutions are either impossible or very, very hard. So all we are going to see, and what I was trying to say in the beginning was that you pushed everything under the carpet for these many, many years. People forgot Palestine. We wouldn't be having this discussion on Palestine. We would be talking about, you know, many other things about how India has made inroads into the Gulf, etc. So the likelihood of breakthrough, I think, is, yes, Netanyahu is important, Rabin is important, but it's really Washington which is still very much, despite China, Washington is going to determine the fate of, and I think the Israeli polity, and I agree here, is broken. And the Americans also, of course, that's not the subject of our discussion, is facing serious issues. On the political Islam, Ambassador Talmiz is far more qualified to say that, but yes, what we saw, 3 countries, Iraq, Libya, Syria. So what has happened in these 3? They succeeded in dislodging Iraq and Libya, but not Syria. But there is no love lost in the West and the United States for secular regimes in the Middle East. That's interesting for us. We would think that, you know, they would like secular regimes, but actually for them it's not so important. And so today we have an Iraq which looks very, very different from what the Americans may have wanted. We have Libya, which is, you know, a completely failed and broken state. So the rise of political Islam in these kind of conditions is possible. I mean, we are seeing that in Iraq. But on the other hand, you know, to add complexity, I mean, you know, you had 30 years of Mubarak, and then you have 15 years now of Sisi, and so he's crushed the brotherhood, and there is no political Islam there. I mean, they have succeeded in smashing it.
Okay, we have only a minute.
Whatever you may say about the Americans, please don't accuse them of having a long-term vision or a strategic vision. They lurch from day to day, pathetically, with a huge armed force, wreaking death and destruction. Look what happened in Afghanistan. Do they even know for a day what they are doing there? Or Iraq, or Libya? And look at the trail of destruction they have left behind. So they don't count. The only thing that matters for them, and that is consensual, is the arms lobby. The arms lobby is a crucial role player in their politics, and that is why you find selling of weaponry is central to them. They are an extremely violent people, violent at home because they don't control gun laws, and they are extremely violent abroad. They sell weapons to anybody who will pay them. With regard to Yitzhak Rabin and Netanyahu, they are in a different context. Rabin emerged from the end of the Cold War. Madrid and Oslo happened. There was a process of peace. They recognized each other. Palestinians recognized Israel as a legitimate state, and they recognized the PLO as the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. His assassination ended any prospect of peace, because you left behind, you had an interim arrangement which left us, the Palestine Authority, did not give us the final status. The final status was left to the future. Since then, it has never happened. Netanyahu has built, he's an extraordinary man. Early in his career, he was regarded as he's called magician. He is the person who bounces back every time when the chips are down. You can never rule him out. Whatever happens, you can't rule him out. This time it appears that he's really lost it. But he is extremely bright, knows where his survival instincts are very sharp, and is able to put together things. This last government he put together is really a disaster, because he brought in thoroughly discredited characters into the forefront, and many Israelis are very uncomfortable with them. They are hardcore racist, very abusive. And the desecration of Al-Aqsa, which we haven't discussed, it's a very sore point with most of the countries in the region. So, what was the last?
Political Islam.
Political Islam. I have written an article in the front line, and if you have the patience, you could go. It's much too long, really very long. But I have argued in that political Islam is now past its use-by date. And really speaking, the region is coming up with fresh ideas. The Muslim Brotherhood is a shadow. If by political Islam we mean transnational activity of the kind that we saw with the Islamic State and earlier with Al-Qaeda, what you have are Islam-influenced entities, but they are largely confined to states. You know, you still have a remnant of the Islamic State in Afghanistan, and you have some radical movements in Africa, particularly in Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, and also in Nigeria, northern Nigeria. But they are confined to that particular part of the Sahel. I feel overwhelmingly that political Islam is today not the same motive force that it used to be earlier. It's now withering away.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ambassador Ahmed. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saran. It's been a privilege to moderate you. I'm sorry that we have taken so much time, but you gave me the latitude. Okay, thank you.
I think we can thank our experts profusely for such a powerful and insightful session. Thank you so much. And I would now request Ambassador Sujan Chinoy to please come on the stage and felicitate our experts of the session, West Asia at War, Will There Ever Be Peace? On this slide. Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, presenting a token of our appreciation to Mr. Talmiz Ahmad. Mr. Pankaj Saran. And Mr. Vikram Mehta. Thank you so much. The souvenir is also a mascot of BLF 2024, which is a gone painting. We have a question for our audience. I hope our volunteers are ready. Name the biographical book authored by Betty Mahmoodi detailing the escape of Betty and her daughter Mahatob from her abusive husband in Iran. A very, very famous book. We have somebody who knows the answer. Yes, please.
Not without my daughter.
Absolutely. Can we have your name?
Sonam.
Zokim? Sonam, sorry. And congratulations. Correct answer. Thank you.
I'd like to inform the audience that our next session, BLF presentation on Emperor Ashoka, Life and Legacy, is about to start in the next few minutes.
Before I forget, our last session was sponsored by LIC, the session on West Asia.
I don't know. What have you got? I've got Ashoka, Life and Legacy. Emperor Ashoka, Life and Legacy. We've got a PPT also.